Hello everyone, my name is Nicole Mbibi and I will be presenting my thesis, Houston We Have a Situationship, which I conducted in the Columbia Couples Lab under the guidance of Anna Giovanni and Dr. Bolger. In 2024, fewer people are getting married. Since 1970, the percentage of US adults that have never been married has increased by 14%. We also see the rise of online dating. Dating apps and websites provide more access to potential partners. There's more alternative choice, so maybe people also aren't settling down as much. And then we also see that more people are living in singlehood. Since 1990, the percentage of US population aged 25 to 54 that are living unpartnered has increased by 90%. So taken all together, this raises the question whether everyone is single and alone. And although there's nothing wrong with that, we see that that's not necessarily the case. Even if people identify as single, it's likely that they still have romantic interactions in their life in some capacity. And so the scientific literature has begun to define and characterize some of these labels and interactions, including the one-night stand, friends with benefits, and the hookup. And all of these different relationship labels are categorized under the umbrella classification of casual sexual relationships and experiences. But in the past 5 years, there's been a rise of a new colloquial term, the situationship. And for the purpose of this first study, we define the situationship as a gray area past being just friends, but falling short of a committed relationship. And so there's been no empirical research on this topic prior, and so we were trying to find a way to ground our work in existing literature, and so we decided to look towards committed relationships, which have been studied for decades. And so the dimensions of committed relationships have been heavily studied, and there's research has found that there are certain attributes and behaviors that are important for relationships. So to help us start to characterize situationships, we wanted to figure out how they compare to committed relationships. And so that leads to our first question: how do situationships compare to and differ from committed relationships in certain attributes and behaviors important for relational functioning? And our second question is a little bit more broad: just how many people have been in a situationship? Is this just a thing people are saying, or are people actually getting into them? And what are the reasons? So we did a study with Columbia students. We recruited 252 students, and the mean age was a little over 20 years old, mostly heterosexual, a little less than half were white, and a little more than half were women. And so this was an observational study, and we administered a survey to all the participants, and there were 4 main parts. And we used a mixed methods approach where we assessed some of the questions quantitatively and some of the questions qualitatively. So first, we really wanted to know if people know what a situationship is and how do they define it. Then we wanted to get at people's perception of situationships. What are the norms and attributes that occur in situationships? Then figuring out what are the typical behaviors in situationships, and have people been in them and why. And for the purpose of this talk, I'll be focusing on these 3 points. So when we asked individuals whether they know what a situationship is, we found that almost all of the participants did know what one was, and we also gave our definition, and we asked them how much they agree with it on a scale of 1 being completely disagree and 7 being completely agree, and we found that mean agreement was 5.77. So for the perception portion, the attributes we looked at were all of these, and all of these attributes are relevant for relational functioning, well-being, and emotional support. And so we instructed participants to imagine their typical situationship and the typical committed relationship, and then to answer some questions. So they might get questions like these: how close would your relationship be? So this first question is getting at intimacy, and participants answer for situationship on a scale of 1 to 7, and then for a committed relationship, they're again also answering on a scale of 1 to 7. Then the following question: how often would you spend fun time with this person? Gets at companionship. And again, they answer for both situationship and committed relationship. All of the questions involved for each of the attributes were adapted from validated scales, and each of the attributes had 1 or 2 questions associated. So to analyze the data from this section, we ran a series of t-tests to examine the differences between participants' perceptions of committed relationships and situationships, and looking at each of the attributes. And so, since we were looking at 10 different attributes, we ran all t-tests adjusting for type 1 error with von Freudian corrections. And so I'm going to orient you to this figure before I show you all of the results. So on the left, on the y-axis, you'll see the list of attributes in a moment. I want to reveal those. And then on the x-axis, you'll see the endorsement of quality. So this is people's ratings of 1 to 7. And then for each attribute, you'll see 2 distributions. You'll see committed relationships in blue and situationships in green. And you'll see also in the distribution that there is a vertical line that represents the mean. And so we ranked all of the attributes going down by greatest difference to least difference, and then we even get a reversal at the end that we'll get to. But trust had the greatest difference between the 2 relationship types. Satisfaction, commitment, intimacy, emotional support, and self-disclosure also had around the same difference. But then once we got to companionship, passion, sexual satisfaction, and conflict, we see a narrowing of those differences. And we also see that for companionship, passion, and sexual satisfaction, situationships are rating relatively high for those attributes. Then for lustfulness and exclusion, we actually see an inversion of the 2 distributions, where situationships are now rating higher in lustfulness and exclusion than committed relationships. So we also asked individuals, have they ever been in a situationship? We found out that the majority of participants have been. And then we asked, what are the reasons for being in a situationship rather than being in a committed relationship? And we had the pleasure of qualitatively coding all 168 responses. We did a rigorous reflexive thematic analysis approach where we looked through the reasons, figured out some themes, and then refined those. I can talk more about during the Q&A, but it was an iterative process, and we found out that some people are in situationships because they don't really want to be tied down. They have a lot going on in their life, and they don't meet all the rules and obligations of a committed relationship. For some, it's just a timing thing. They might be moving away soon or just studying abroad in town for a little bit. For some, the other person never had a chance. They didn't meet standards, there was no future in the relationship. And then for others, we also saw that exploration was a factor for them. So maybe they're just still uncertain and they're feeling the person out and trying to figure out, oh, do I want a committed relationship with this person? Or they just wanted the freedom to explore other partnerships as well. And then some people are using situationships as a source of pleasure, whether that's sex, general intimacy, or general enjoyment, just having a good time. And then another reason why people ended up in situationships were lack of communication. One thing to note, these numbers don't equal 100 because some people's reasons have multiple themes involved in them. And so, in all, we found that situationships are real, and many people have been in at least one. Situationships differ most from committed relationships in trust, satisfaction, and commitment. Situationships are rated highly, though, in companionship, passion, and sexual satisfaction. So this may hint at some relational benefit to situationships. Common reasons for being in a situationship are hesitations about commitment, timing, life transitions, or there being no future between the partners. And then some limitations to our study. We were studying people's perceptions instead of their live experiences in a situationship. So maybe future research can assess that. And then we also only compared situationships to committed relationships. And like I said at the beginning, there's a whole array of casual sexual relationships and experiences, so it would be cool to see how situationships relates to those different relationship types. And so our ongoing work is starting to address some of those limitations. we've added a third relationship type, the hookup, and we want to see how that compares to situationships and committed relationships for each of those attributes. And then we've also added fear of being single and commitment readiness scales, so trying to assess whether these things could affect people's likeliness of being in a situationship. I'd like to thank Anna, Dr. Bolger, and my sorry family, and all of you guys for listening.
Praise God. All right, we have questions. Yes.
Thank you, that was super interesting. Why do you think that people prefer, or why this increasing trend of situationships? Even though people rate situationship as being less satisfactory or less passion, like it seemed like the mean was like between 3 and 4, so pretty low. So why are they increasing if people don't really love them ultimately?
Yes, this is a question that we're definitely very interested in, and that's one of the reasons why we assess people's reasons. I think the enjoyment part of it, and also like the companionship side, because we did see like companionship, intimacy, sexual satisfaction, and I'm blanking on the last one. But for all those traits, those are generally good for well-being and relational functioning. So there is some potential relational benefits for a situationship.